Good morning.
Second. Good morning. How are you today?
How am I today? Okay. Oh, here comes Robert. There he is.
Oh, there you both are.
We're all here. Yes.
Uh, Catherine with her river, Robert with his blurred kitchen, me with my paintings or
Oops.
whatever.
And Katie Singer just wants to talk. Hang on just a minute.
All righty. Carl, how are you doing?
Um,
You eating lunch?
Breakfast.
Breakfast. That's right. You're 3 hours. Okay.
It's a late breakfast, but having my blueberries with cereal.
Oh, sounds good.
Well, mm, so my Soil Smart, Soil Wise email only just came a minute ago. So I had to dive into my trash heap and find an old one so I could get onto the website. Thank goodness we have all the stuff held in storage.
Electronic perpetuity or something like that, or
Yeah, well, or at least until you fail to pay the iCloud bill.
um, I think I pay an iCloud bill, but I don't like to use it. But this week I lost a critical document that I was supposed to send to Catherine. And I think it's the first document that I've lost completely. Um, because my computer, even when it has a shutdown, it saves most documents. And at the
Right.
time, there were other documents that it backed up, but it did not back up this document. And I swear to God, this is not a dog ate my homework excuse. This has really happened.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. But um, so Katie Singer is a woman that Carl and I know through um, the Bio for Climate classes. And we've been talking. She's a writer, and she's done some interesting things. She did a book on the Holocaust, and she's done some books on female mutilation and natural process to menstruation. Um, and she and her husband Brooke, who's my age, um, are having to move, and so we've been talking about maybe moving in together.
Wow. Mm.
She's in New Mexico, we're in Washington, and I don't know how fast she has to move, but
I
um,
think it's relatively soon.
yeah, and it's become. I mean, it's moving is difficult. It's just it's so expensive, any place you look at, and together we might be able to actually have some interesting possibilities. So I've been looking for places in Washington that I think would serve two families basically,
Wow.
um, and so
But
we'll see.
well, you have my stamp of approval.
Oh, thank you.
I kind of feel a little more responsible for kind of putting you together more directly than just in the group. So, but I find both of you very um I respect both of you immensely, and um, um, I'm not going to say who's smarter. I got I got it a choke. I think that would be. I think you guys would it would work really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. There's so much to go through. So
Yeah.
it's and my daughter is being as open as she can be. Um, there's a part of her, so she is a multiple personality. So there are some personalities that are like, uh, and others that are like, okay, we'll talk about it. So we'll
Hmm.
see how that goes. But so I'm hoping that we'll all meet tomorrow. We'll see.
That's good. Good luck.
Yeah, I've not met her husband yet, so
I have
Did
said
you
hello
say
to him.
they live in Arizona? They live in
New
Arizona?
Mexico, New
New
Mexico.
Mexico, yeah, you said that.
Yeah, she's
So
been there
they
25
are
years.
willing to move. Uh,
Well, they have to move. The question is
no, I
where.
mean, but move from different state.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not willing to move hugely out of city really because of my work with the city. So it would just
Yeah.
be really awkward to give
Yeah.
that up. So she's kind of offered to do that. So we'll just see.
I think in your with your work, she would be um, a great ally.
Oh, she would be. Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot to be said for the partnership and the little bit that I already know. Um, there are some other things. She doesn't have a smartphone. They don't have a TV.
Wow.
Okay, we're at the other end of the spectrum. Uh, but
I
yeah.
wish I didn't have a TV or a smartphone.
Oh, I don't. I couldn't live with. The phone is really important to me.
I'm not saying that I can't live without it, but I'm just saying I wish
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's
But
more
I could also
aspirational.
drop it. Yeah, I mean, if my life changed, I could do that. I think.
Sure.
Uh, well, it's like, oh yes, I can quit that habit until you try them. Uh, but we haven't talked pets and allergies and all that kind of stuff. And we'd need two refrigerators. So I mean, my daughter and I have trouble with one refrigerator. So the four of us, I
Hmm.
can't imagine. But both she and my daughter cook. That's good. So yeah, we'll see.
Does your daughter sometimes cook Italian and sometimes Chinese based on her personalities?
Um,
That's
no, but she has an incredible sensitivity to flavors.
that changes.
To flavors.
But does it change from personalities?
I have not noticed that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's us. Yeah, mostly if some of her personalities don't eat, basically. I mean, yeah, it's more complicated than that,
Yeah.
or not as precise as that. Maybe I should say. I don't know, but yeah. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to explore.
Well, I wish you well. I mean, this is it's very important to have you know, a stable home, however you want to form it.
Yes, and
To
home
have
is
a
really
base
important.
that you can be dependent on,
Yeah,
because you are dependent on it. I mean, it's
yeah.
just a different way of living to not have that.
Well, that's why it would
Yeah.
be nice to own it as opposed to rent because that
Mm.
dependence is different. And we're really here at the will of the landlord. Now, it's not easy for her to get rid of us, but there's always that tenuousness, the possibility, and just the going through difficult periods with somebody who has that kind of control is always unsettling. So, yeah. So
I've
we'll
met
see.
her husband briefly,
Mm,
and you may know this about him already, but he grew up on a ranch without electricity.
yeah, yeah, or plumbing, indoor
Yeah,
plumbing. Yep, yeah.
that's even at that age. even at that advanced, like, oh my God, age.
I'm still older by a year, I think.
That's really unusual.
Yep. So there's just yeah a lot of possibilities. Um, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. Um, what was I going to say? So I've been more engaged with the people in Europe too in this last week, and that's starting to heat up a little bit as we get
Mm.
closer to meeting in March. Um, so I'm starting to do more meetings with them, uh, and some of that. I mean, it's like at 3 and 6 in the morning,
Hmm.
which makes a mess of my schedules.
This is. Did you get my document? Did it help?
It did. So yes, to follow up. So
We can talk
um,
about it later. We don't, so I don't want to use this
yeah,
time.
yeah, okay. So I've been noodling on independence. I'm gonna do a talk for the U.S. Values Alliance in April on independence as an American value, because it's so big in our country. We really think we're all independent. Um,
I wonder, not to be, not to take some kind of responsibility as matchmaker, but I wonder we might have a talk with my friend Bruce, who's also I talk with weekly, who's
mm-hmm,
another octogenarian mentor.
mm-hmm,
But he has some really interesting insights about interdependence,
mm-hmm.
which has come from living in a retirement community now.
Oh, that's right. I
And in
remember
fact,
him telling me some.
the insight comes um, from the increased awareness of dependent living,
Mhm.
and it's brought him to the kind of the flip side of that, which is that it's really interdependent living, and that even the idea of interdependent or that we were part of a community, um, in that context, brings some insights into, even though we like to pretend that we're independent.
Well, there's two pieces of that for me. One, historically, I think at the founding of our country, the independence was really seen as independence from Britain more than independent individuals. So the colonies were claiming independence, not that they were independent as individuals. And it sort of has morphed over the centuries. And I think there's a confusion between independence and agency, and those two
Hmm.
get lumped together without being precisely defined or understood. Um,
I'm sorry, did you say agency and dependence or independence?
and independence, yeah, because there has to be. I mean, we're always responsible for our own behavior, and in that sense, there is an independence, but it is always in the natural world in response to relationship. So you're making choices, but you're making choices about how to manage and enhance in the natural world the relationships you find yourself in. And I think that actually proves to be true in our own experience. We just don't call it out or see it. It gets conflated. I mean, I'm thinking of Milwaukee and the some of the political things that we're going through that are really stretching our understanding of being independent and being able to stand by ourselves. It's standing with others and for others that we're expressing our independence from an authoritarian style. So there's a sense of that separation but it's really through the actions of agency that that happens, which really speaks to the interdependence, because the co-creation, the autopoetic aspect of our lives is always this cyclic thing. You do, I do, you do, I do, you do, I do. And there's these constant adjustments and changes as the decisions by others around us get manifested. And then we respond and react to them. And that's a mutual co-creation. So there's not really the separation that that word independence would like us to believe in. It's a myth.
It is.
Robert?
It is a myth. New England is an interesting
Yeah.
study because in the 1600s, people lived very isolated lives for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you had a farm up a valley in a distant hollow, you were really on your own. Um, and people would help one another. I mean, they'd go and say camp at your house, for a week in order to help you build a barn. I mean, that was real. So with total interdependence, but you had this sense that you were the absolute king in your property, and that's when I grew up. Those terms were used. Master of your domain. The
Mm-hmm.
So it's I mean it's been applied, particularly in the West. The Western, the cowboy, the whole image of the pioneers, struggling against life itself, um, and in the South, the same thing happened, in certain ways. But then again, that was probably the most feudal of all experiences in this country, from those days. Slave masters, primarily the greatest slave owners really began to to act and sort of control their territory like feudal lords very
Mm-hmm.
early on. And that's where our great president, George Washington and Jefferson, and they all came from that background. So I don't
I
know. I
think
mean, I guess the
the
point I'm making, that in Vermont, the the tendency was to identify with the individual, the rugged individual. But I'd say down south, that was not the case. You were basically you know, what do you call it?
Surf?
A farmer, a tenant farmer working for the feudal lord, which was almost a precise replication of what was brought from England. Um, so, you know, I think that in one case, the image was real. We really came from that in New England, and still a lot of very uniquely independent types that I grew up with anyway. And whereas I think it's very imaginary in other parts of the country.
How do you see the relationship between independence and colonialism?
Well, I've I've done a lot of study about people were really on their own once they were settled, and they the king actually had given them a land grant
Land.
in
Right.
cases, not directly, of course, but they were on their own. And I think they primarily joined together for protection, defense, um, because absolutely on their own they were susceptible to being ransacked by some highly organized Native American war parties. So it was a complex situation. Evidently, the stories reign that there were some wonderful friendships going on until someone got greedy and started shooting at those rebels who were, treated like criminals, and so the whole balance of friendship just fell apart. That's the basis of what I read. That's 1600s. And there was a very different situation in Boston itself, or Concord, around New York City, New Amsterdam. But even the town I grew up in, a suburb of New York, that was in that century, that was still forest. It was deep forest, and there were certain Native American chiefs that left their names as like Keophram Road, which is where I was living. 21 Keophram Road, named after a Native American chief.
I would add one small adjustment to that is that I think more often that we took their names.
Well, true. I mean that, but there was some respect. That story is very interesting because evidently there was tremendous respect amongst the people who were actually living in the territory. It was newcomers who would come in, say from New Amsterdam, some Dutch colonels, or were leading a war party basically, because someone up there had complained, and so suddenly a village was wiped out, a native village. So I mean, there was a framework of real independent, points with interaction. It was kind of like a lattice rather than a blended sheet of steel, which turns out to be lattice at the smallest levels. But anyway, we won't get into that.
But
But
what's when you say lattice? What is
a structural lattice where
Oh, okay.
there were very very tenuous connectors, but there was
Hubs.
the hub the hubs were very independent, and then there were areas of combined interest, say in a river that went through, so that there would be combined attention paid to that, for instance. Um, but I mean, I'm just going over some of my impressions of the history of that area, and because there's this huge sense of independence even today, which at least until I left that area in 20s and my 20s, um, there really was a local democracy based upon people really coming to town meetings and really having it out with each other, verbally, just tossing it around, real democracy, which is for the most part a simple fantasy now, but it was real until within our lifespan. Um, but no wonder it's been hung on to. I don't think any of this applies anymore. I mean, as far as food is concerned, I am absolutely not an independent
Right.
actor on my own. I mean, we have a garden. Okay, we play with, that's a hobby. Um, would not support us for more than a week. If we were totally dependent on it.
And I think that's a really interesting example too, because the and I've often ruminated on this in terms of how to change structures and did we make right decisions as a species and that kind of thing. That there, I mean, you can manage everything for yourself if you want to. It is conceivably possible to grow your own food, to have enough critters, a sheep or two, so that you can spin and weave your own clothes. You can do that. And when you do that, that is your life. There's no time to do much of anything else because your time is all
Right.
in making clothes, spinning the wool to make those clothes, all that kind of stuff. And so it's a blessing in a way when we become specialized and somebody who really loves to make clothes gets to make clothes and people will pay them for those clothes and then spend their time doing other things. So there's a certain advantage and appreciation for a division of labor where we become very much interdependent on each other by deliberate choice that we really choose those roles. And what I'm hearing and what you're talking about is so much this back and forth between how to separate oneself from the background, whatever the background looks like, in a way that feels authentic for oneself, and then to re-engage and become dependent or interdependent in, again, ways that feel authentic to oneself, which for me would be the place where agency touches this, that those choices are from agency, that is how we manage our sense of self and our relationships in a way that feels healthy and life affirming for who we are, which only we can do. Nobody else can decide what's life affirming for us. We're the only person, the only place that decision can be made is through the self. And yet that constant engagement also requires that back and forth between I as an independent, separate person, entity, making evaluations, and then engaging in a way that makes those assessments real. And I don't think we pay enough attention to that or honor that space enough. The illusion of sort of it's one way or the other. The seduction of the seduction of relationship is the other thing that really. I was just reading an article on Pam Bondi and how from people who knew her, she's changed from this warm, kind, generous, open-hearted person to who she is now.
Wow, there's an interesting test for analysis. Oh my God, that's
Yeah, just she's totally not what people who knew her when she was younger saw her as. And that the seduction of relationship, of needing to be liked by somebody in authority, which seems to be what the driver is now more than anything, creates this kind of loyalty and willingness to risk, because she's at risk of her own incarceration for some of the things she's done, which would not fit with the person that she started out to be in everybody's estimation. And that seems to be true with human relationships. And maybe I would also say with dogs, that dogs get caught in that too. I've seen dogs that sort of take on the illnesses of their parents, their human parents, either as a protective kind of thing or just this is kind of what we do. that there is a corruption that happens in that relationship when the human part of it uses that pet relationship for their own comfort and not for the pet's benefit as well. So dogs are overfed and coddled in ways that don't really support them. Uh, um, so it's this dance between being independent and interdependent and dependent and subjugated. All of those things are in a ball that kind of gets pulled out at different times if we're not careful and don't pay attention. Um, yeah, just thoughts?
Well, I was just
Well,
thinking that
go ahead, Irvin.
I'll go quickly. The the wage slave relationship with the the financier, the one with the money,
Mm-hmm.
the
Or
the
the one with the food.
rentier. I mean, if you study the situation that occurred in Ireland at the time of the famine, potato famine, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just extraordinary that um, a few people, a very few people, had the power, owned the land, so that they were able to um, divert a lot of the land that, a lot of the cultivation of food for the local people into whatever it was. I forget what it was that they were growing, but it wasn't food.
Mm.
And suddenly, the situation was uh, deteriorated enough that the individual workers could not support themselves on the food that they could grow for themselves. So they were starving. And, that to me is just extraordinary when you look at the very simple equation, or at least it seems very simple from the distance of time, that, um, but it seems like, there was this great barrier of greed that, and people not just being refused to acknowledge that their workers could be suffering. And so there were, I mean, millions died. It was just incredible. I mean, and then a huge number came over to the United States. Well, situations like that are happening in other countries right now all the time. Hasn't happened in this country, particularly, on a mass level. It happens in small towns when a business just says, "Oh, we got a better deal in Mexico, so we're leaving today." The same thing happens. People aren't necessarily starving because there has been a backup in terms of the social contract. But if that's taken away, we're basically, to my thinking, the image held in the minds of the ones who created 2000, Project 2025 was a feudal lord, matrix set upon, the country. Um, but it's not that far off. It's just that we've had 80 years of extreme success. Um, so I see a major shift occurring in this country right now in terms of finding that either acceptable or acceptable because you give in and say, well, we can't fight it. You're accepting it. And I think it started as, rebelling against the corporate, uh, you know, um, takeover of all industries and so forth. I mean, I rebelled against that, but always working on my own. And am grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. I don't think it's going to be possible in another few years to make any kind of living doing it that way. you have to band together and form some kind of a monopoly in your area of, say, remodeling. You have a remodeling corporation, which are starting to show up all around the country, and are taking most of the work of the jobs and the hiring, and it's that industry, the remodeling industry, is under tremendous change right now. As late as 2015, I would say, there was still a tremendous amount of
Independent.
there was access to the industry from, on your own as your own independent contractor. Um, that's closing very rapidly, at least around this area, particularly because a lot of the young men who got involved at 2015 were Latino, and they're now being rounded up. Um,
Hmm.
all of those workers are disappearing. Um, it just nothing seems to be being done that makes any sense. It was like everybody has blinkers on and is working only toward their own profit, um, with little to no um, re- respect for the other. I mean, it's turned. I've the way I've witnessed that is as an architectural designer in that process. Um, there was very little respect coming from the contractors, and among the contractors, there's very little respect for the subcontractors. Um, it's just amazing. It's falling apart from the idea that we're all involved in a wonderful career choice, a field that we can be proud of because we each have a certain corner of it. Um, that's going to be happening to plumbers and electricians soon enough as well as they become glommed together into these larger companies, um, which is happening.
I,
So
Carol, I
yeah,
want
I don't know what this all leads to, but the dangers I see is it is conglomeration and the thinning
it's not
out of
seeing the
those.
whole. It's getting so caught in the parts.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
Idaho did that. They decided they that they were independent and there was no reason to have all these building codes that just got in the way of what they wanted to do. So they got rid of a
Oh,
lot of them.
I didn't know that.
And now they're having all these problems with buildings because they don't function because people went outside the code. So there's not this understanding that there is an overarching structure that supports and needs to be paid attention to. That the structure is what, I mean, that's where government is, right? It's a structure that really provides the context in which all these other things can happen in a way that serves the whole. And when we stop serving the whole and want to serve us, which is the whole magna thing, that's, I mean, we used to be a strong country because you could do what you wanted. You just couldn't force other people to do what you wanted to do. And that live and let live allowed for a freedom and a stability and a strength that doesn't happen when you start forcing people to be like you, which is where we are now. And that's just a fragmentation and actually a much weaker place to be. Carl, what were you thinking?
Well, lots of things. To your kind of winding backwards, the idea of where we're at now, yeah, and I want to look into this example of Idaho, but the idea of um, this super independent that we can do it ourselves, I think stems from Ronald Reagan's. There's probably other earlier ideas, but Ronald Reagan's idea of the government is the problem.
Right.
So for me, it's very clear that that freedom and stability that we had before Ronald Reagan was, a big part of that was that that we trusted the government. There's some we trusted some system that created some rules that we all operated under. I think the thing that the Project 2025 and so where we're at now is the this is the what Reagan set into motion. We're now seeing that it doesn't work. Idaho, Texas, the example in Texas where Texas literally did not connect to the grids from other states, which is why a few years ago Texas had that horrible freeze and lack of energy is because they literally had made a decision to be independent from other states' electrical grid.
Yep.
And I think that
Yep.
I mean if our democracy is gonna survive, we're gonna have to snap back from these bad lessons from Reagan. And Minnesota, I mean, the best part that's coming out of Minnesota is that we are not independent. I mean, we're not all in this by ourselves. One other thought from what you've been saying is, and this is about land ownership. I think a really critical part of American culture and ethos is the idea of land ownership, and even the Thomas Jeffersons and the people who became, the founding fathers are the wealthy parts of of America and the colonies. These were people who could not own land in Europe.
Hmm.
So the idea, people came to America, sometimes even as indigent servants, because it was possible to own land. And so this I think is a really important part of our American myth is the importance of owning land.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to me, it's a really important point because these people who came to America, there was no chance of them owning land in England and in Europe because land was only owned by the aristocracy. So I think that's an important part of the.
What we're starting to see too in terms of owning land, just speaking of water, is that water is indiscriminate. It doesn't stop at boundaries. It doesn't say, oh, by the way, I don't like this person, I'm not going there. It doesn't function in that way. And for it to function well, it needs the freedom to do what it needs to do, which crosses a lot of the boundaries that we arbitrarily make on all sorts of fronts. And that's one of the problems we're having with trying to manage water is we're trying to do it my piece and your piece.
That's a really good point. I mean, you and I have clearly, I mean, we're drawn to the idea of water, and the issue of water is that it's not just about my land and your land.
Yeah, you
The
can't do that.
so water is the water problem is exposing the myth that we are all independent, and I mean the water problem is just one aspect, but an important aspect of us starting to learn that we are um, going past the ecological um, the ability for the ecology to support life,
Overfill.
and that's driving, and it needs to drive us to uh, acknowledging that we're in this together. I just one other point. I don't know if you saw this email yesterday from the climate, whatever the climate community about off-grid living, and there was a woman who sent an example of a off-grid community, which then I actually responded to Katie last night. Like this example that this woman gave is what I think I said to Katie, like I'm screaming on the inside, it's like, oh, so completely fucking stupid. And I have a list of problems in some of these issues you've heard before. But this particular example is of a ragtag farm. It's no model for a community. The building quality is completely bullshit, horrible. Backing up. So I'm going to work on is like here are some clear guidelines of how you build working with nature, solar orientation. There's just some clear ideas like you have to have enough roof overhang. You have to have orientation. And if you do that, that's the way to build and live that has the least impact on the world.
And it's cheaper.
And it's cheaper. And you in the water is part of that. And and I want to offer this in this eventually into this conversation, not this, is that here as somebody who's been looking at this issue a long time, and I welcome all challenges. This is how you build and live with the least with impact on the earth, and it does not include limitless solar panels.
So I want to go back to Newton, because I think one of the things he brought forward was we are independent of these laws. We don't
He
have to.
Newton did.
Yep. That we don't have to abide by all the rules that we have set up, all the respect that we had for nature. We actually are in control, and when we do that, we have all this power, which is where a lot of our current capacity has come from. The willingness to not live by nature's rules, but to go outside them, and knowing that we can do that and seeing what happens. Our abundance is false because we're robbing from both the future and from other places in the planet. We are not sticking within our own restrictions. We break those and take water from the Colorado River. Why not?
Well, I have to say it's easier to
Yeah.
blame Reagan, but
But I
but
think that's where it
this is a
started.
this
That
is a great
was,
insight because I would back to perspective. I mean, Newton's building upon this idea that we are separate from nature,
that's right.
which
That's
is
right.
not just perspective, but it's the
We're
Judeo.
independent.
We are
Independent
separate
from.
from it,
Well,
which is uniquely
I think
European
there's
viewpoint.
another, I
I'm
think
sorry.
there's a very related point that's extremely important and even maybe goes beyond that. We are separate from each other. Somehow we've gotten our idea across in our minds that, well, for instance, that the building inspector is separate from us. He has completely separate vision, aspirations, responsibilities. And
And this is a really great point, and probably from our profession, we think of the building inspector as the other guys. They are the other team. They're the problem.
well, also the adversary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the
that's
thing is,
adversary. That's what I'm saying. Trying to say.
so
Yeah.
so so back in 1979, I was finishing up a house that for myself that was going to have a wood stove. And in Eugene, Oregon, you were not allowed to just have a wood stove as your heating supply. Because I didn't want to spend the money to put in some baseboard heater, which I would never use. So I explained to the building inspector exactly what I was doing, and I showed him all the drawings. What I was doing was the wood stove had a cowling over it, sort of surrounding parts of it, and that would draw air in through a fan, which was creating a vacuum.
Vortex.
In the center of the house was this big closet filled with river rock, rounded river rock. So I was explaining this to him, and he listened and he listened, and he came back. He said, I really like your idea. And we started playing with it together, and he gave me some tips how to improve it, but from his thinking. And he said, "Look, if you want to get a patent for this, I'll help you go through that process. It's not easy." Well, compare that to today, where there are no specific building department, a building inspector department in a particular jurisdiction. Brookhaven, the city, hires from the same company. They contract their building inspectors. Those building inspectors are not allowed they go for a month, say in Brookhaven. The next month they'll be up in Marietta, and the next month they'll be over, in Peachtree Center, um, just so that they cannot supposedly, form these relationships.
Wow.
And what's happening is you get people who just don't give a damn about each other, trying to help each other. The building inspector shows up and nobody's there. He doesn't call you. It used to happen in the 80s. They'd call you and say, where are you? I'm here. No, they wouldn't call. They leave a sticker and they go off in a huff. Um, it's respect.
This seems like a really deliberate strategy by either the city government or the
I think so.
corporation to
Well,
to to
it's cheaper. It's cheaper.
oh, I know yeah, I actually in Los Angeles, in California, plan check is almost always contracted now, but not inspectors. But it seems like it's even beyond just cost. It's like there's this deliberate corporate process to not let their employees get close to other people where they're going to find
Yeah.
It's the
common.
fear that relationship would undermine the rules and the
Well, that's really
standards.
I mean,
And it does sometimes. It
that
does
sound like
sometimes.
it sounds like the slave owner not wanting his slaves to talk to one another because they might
it.
be planning
Exactly right.
something. I mean, that's
Or
exactly what it
departments in a
is.
company talk to each other. I've been there.
Yep, I mean, so basic respect.
And it's an
I think some
understanding of the
people
whole. The
think that
whole isn't
basic
there.
lack of respect is a way of broadcasting their independence, their rebelliousness, their standing alone. Whereas it's just the opposite. It's
So,
just
Robert, say that
tearing
again.
themselves away from any
Say that
kind of
again.
meaningful interaction.
Say that again. There's. Are you talking about like the people who choose to be independent?
No,
Um.
they
I'm
justify
thinking of
their
young people now
separation.
who say, I'm an independent, they boast of their independence when in fact they're living in this world of complete isolation. And
Well,
So
they're
there is a
not getting
difference
things
between
done because you
independence and
have to be able
isolation.
to work with other people in this society.
well, back to my screaming about these off the grid farms. In fact, I've looked into others, and this is just so common for all of these. The earth ships, the people who want to be independent, and they have glommed on to a couple of different building ideas that produce shit. That produce buildings that are not environmentally stable, but they're driven by an aesthetic, just like everything else. And this is the time. This is getting to myth busting. I mean, but there's but all of these farms, and I mean, looked at a couple this morning. They're the people who are there, they're long hair, stringy, kind of hippie people, but they're building crappy buildings. So there's never orientation. They're these basic rules that if they just bought a book on passive solar design, they would learn, hey, orient a building to the south. But it's that's and so they're missing how do you really build with nature and how to really work with water in a way that's beyond your own property. It's there's this veneer of independence, but it's just a veneer, and it's not honoring the land in a deep way.
Well, and then so this all boils down to is this being being a show off, finding out the only way you can be a show off today, if you're a wage earner and you're stuck in that process, you're not making any of your own food. All you can do is you can make enough money to buy one of these diesel trucks that you can go black, what do they call that? Black smoke, blow your back black smoke all over the city. I mean, that is a form of rebellion that seems to be popular down south here. Um, what's it called? It's basically a backfire created in your diesel engine, which creates copious black smoke. And you drive by, um, you know, maybe some demonstrators along a road, and you oh, this black smoke all over
Is that
the.
is that
It's
actually I've seen videos of that. Is there something they do to their trucks to actually do that in deliberately?
yes, yeah. It can be enhanced. There's stuff they can do to enhance the smoke. The backfire. Um,
Yeah, it's
I don't know
basically
how
a
to do it.
right.
I mean,
Sticking
when
your
I used to hitchhike, they used to throw hamburgers at me. It's so bad. These kids would drive by and they'd throw a half-eaten hamburger at. I'd eat some of it sometimes if I was hungry
Wow.
enough. They keep othering.
yeah,
Everyone
Other
yeah,
others
yeah,
everyone
yeah,
else, and
yeah.
they're not my kind.
Well, it's so I'm going to be charitable here. That there's
you're so boring when you're charitable.
and and I see this in the Magna. I really do. That they're sensitive to those areas where they've been excluded inappropriately or been not included appropriately, and then they tar and feather everything with that, and they want to withdraw from it, but there's no other place. You're not going to
Right.
something, you're just separating from something, and that leads to a desire to destroy what you are separating from without understanding how you're all in the same situation from different perspectives, and that situation needs to be maintained even though what they're doing, them, is not right. What you're doing is also not right because neither one of you are supporting the whole. I think that's what the Canadian Prime Minister really spoke to so eloquently, is that we shade that for different reasons, and we're willing to tolerate it for different reasons over time. And then when it starts to really not work, the only option that seems to be apparent is to just separate from it. But there's no place to go to. So there's no building, there's no repairing, there's no re engagement because you don't know how to do that. You don't know what that looks like. It's just there. You're just reacting to the I know it's wrong, and therefore I'm going to kill it. But I don't know what's right. I don't know how to find that space or find people to be in that space with. And I think that's part of the separate problem. One of the ladies from Milwaukee talked about when ICE was in her neighborhood and people came out to witness what was happening. She said she discovered all the people in her neighborhood who felt the same. She had no idea. And they all felt that they were independent, separate people all by themselves, and they weren't. And it
Are
was
they
a
coming together now? Is that
Oh yeah, very much so. They're driving people to work and driving people to the doctors, not letting them be alone
yeah?
in order to keep them safe.
This may save that those values that are coming forward may
But you've got to act in that way, and they are.
yeah.
They. But that's also lessons for the rest of us because it's not like it's not going to happen in other places. Um, and it may be quieter. I mean, he's got thousands of ICE people there. They showed a map of the difference between Chicago and there. So with Chicago has maybe 150 folks in a huge city, so they're quieter. You don't notice what they're doing. It's harder to come together against that because it's not so dramatic and showy. You can't see what they're doing. You don't know where they're going. Where in Milwaukee there's so many of them, it's really obvious. You can spot them. You can do it. Although they're starting
I mean,
to
what, I mean, Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, yeah,
It's
they're starting to disguise themselves as Amazon drivers, as other people, and not.
crosswalk school crosswalk.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And yeah, this is a really important point. There's like 3,000 people, 3,000 ICE agents in Minneapolis.
Yeah. So it's easier to address. The fewer there are, the harder it is to see what's happening, to know it and to notice and to be.
Well, but it also because there's so many, this is they're doing what mobs always do.
Yeah.
They feel more freedom to abuse people.
Well, the Border Patrol has always felt that, has felt that for decades, actually. No president has really paid attention to how they're managing the border. And a lot of these people are from the Border Patrol who have this history of being this way. That's how they've worked for years. So this isn't anything different for them at all.
Well,
They're
I
just
would
doing what they've always done.
the
But,
rapid expansion is only is brought
well, there's that,
untrained
yes.
people into
Yep.
that culture. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
Which is why the czar had that, why Bovine had that attitude, is because that's what he's been doing. What's your problem?
mixed with a little bit of classic Napoleon complex.
Well, yeah, you get that way when you have that kind of,
Well, and when you're 5'4".
yeah, and supported by it, supported for it. So you're making money. People are happy with you. So somebody doesn't like it. Yeah. No, I mean, that's just so true. We have seen that kind of sloppy corruption happen in almost every industry that you can mention, and it just doesn't hold. I mean, it just doesn't have any stamina, and we're seeing it just fall apart everywhere. And people are not understanding that it's the lack. I want to say standards and rules, but that's not really what I mean. It's the lack of respect and relationship which informs those standards and rules that has just been missing.
I would add to that it's the missing of the not understanding that those rules, whether it's building codes or whatever we've been talking about, these are not imposed by some sinister government, that they are us.
Well, but
And
it's
we're
only
miss
partially true. See, that's the thing. It's only partially true. There's a lot of corruption in those codes and rules, too. There are stupid codes and rules for absolutely no reason, but you had a lobbying thing there, or somebody with a lot of money who came in and said, "Don't let them do that because it's going to take away my job, my money." And people said, "Okay." They didn't see any real reason not to, or they benefited from it in some way. That's the problem. Is that everything has been infected with that kind of laissez-faire, um, willingness to just like bend the rules for this person or that person, and it just undoes the whole structure. And you kind of know that, but in that situation, it's fine. It's not going to make a big difference once or twice or whatever. It's a justification, and then it becomes habitual. And we all know that. I mean, we know we can say that, but we're living the experience of, we really want it clean and honest. We really want to know what's right and wrong. We want to be able to trust that. We want to have confidence that you care, and that the reasons they're there is because you care, not because you had somebody behind you with a lot of money who thought it was a good idea. And that's in every industry. Every industry.
it's our culture now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's infiltrated everywhere. And I think that's part of the rebellion that we're seeing, is that people sense that and know that, and they don't know what to do about it. And, I mean, it's just so systemic and it's so subtle. You can't make blanket rules or blanket decisions. So people go off the grid. They just want out of the whole thing to start over. Even if it's not as good as it could be, it's clean. They know what they're doing. There's nobody forcing them to be different than they think they ought to be. And that's a start. May not be an answer, but it feels like a
Well, I
start.
lived among a lot of the hippies in the late 70s, and believe me, they hadn't gotten very far away from their
That's,
upbringing,
yep, yep,
no matter how they tried,
yep.
particularly the way the men would be treating the women. All this free love and everything, everyone's wonderful. There was just an extraordinary lack of understanding of what that really meant. You
Yeah.
have treated your fellow human being.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep. And it's been all so much easier to make it about the other guy, not about you.
well, maybe it's time. I need to get going.
It is. It is. Good
Been a
discussion, though.
pleasure as usual.
Yes.
Very nice to hear all seeing
Oh,
and talk to both.
I will net miss, I think, next Friday. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm getting into there's a. Let me
Yeah.
see.
I have an appointment downtown through the afternoon.
Friday
So
is the 6th,
I will
right?
miss on the 6th, yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I will be here on that, but there's one of these Fridays that is going to be dicey for me too.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I will
on
see
Friday
you
the
later.
13th, I have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Friday the 13th, I have a chiropractor at 11:45. So I have to leave a half hour early for that, whatever that is, quarter after 12, quarter after 11, I think. So,
Well, that's not a problem. Doesn't start here. It's 1:30 when we start. Oh, here.
yeah, so the 13th is going to be dicey. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we could start a little earlier. That would be an option. We can talk about that next week.
All right.
Okay.
See you. Bye
All right.
now.
Okay.
Bye. So,